That's not just the sound of that first sip of Morning Joe. It's the sound of someone shopping for a car on Carvana from the comfort of home.
That's a good blend.
It's time to take it easy, like answering some easy questions to get pre-qualified for a car in minutes.
Talk about starting the morning right.
Just like customizing your terms so your car fits your budget. Visit Carvana.com or download the app to experience car shopping the way it should be. Convenient, comfortable. The comfort of your favorite seat is now your comfy car selling command center, thanks to Carvana.
It doesn't get any better than this.
Your favorite seat's the best spot in the house. Make it even better by entering your license plate or VIN and getting a real offer in minutes.
There really is no place like home.
And speaking of home, Carvana will pick up your car from yours after you finalize your offer. Visit Carvana.com or download the app and sell your car from your comfy place.
In 1692, the Puritan colonies of North America had fallen on dark times. The colonists had suffered through two devastating wars with Native American and French neighbors, which had left much of the Maine frontier a scorched ruin and produced a refugee crisis. The colonies had their charter revoked and a military governor installed. These circumstances had a visible impact on the towns which inhabited the Massachusetts coast. Towns that had seen growing prosperity and had begun to move away from their austere and devout origins. Numerous religious leaders began to see these unfortunate events as an encroaching darkness which signaled God's displeasure at the colonists' departures from tradition and purity. There was a call for religious and moral reformation. Supporters began to search for any way to prove their devotion and regain the favor of their deity. For hundreds of years, there was one well-known way to thin the ranks of the devil, to identify those who consorted with the Lord of Lies and cast them out. To regain the grace of God, it was necessary to find those who were labeled witches and carry out God's justice. This case file joined the theorists as they take a peek at the devil's little black book in the Salem Witch Trials.
Welcome to Alien Theorists Theorizing, Case File 162, the Salem Witch Trials, aka Witchy Women.
Woo-hoo, witchy women in colonial Massachusetts.
I'm Braden.
I'm Zell.
I'm Dan.
And I'm extremely fucking happy that the Lions won on Sunday. We're 3-3. Woo! Victory
Nobody
Monday.
cares.
I do. 100% nobody cares.
Woo!
Almost couldn't play D&D because he was screaming so loud at the game. Lost his voice.
Lost my voice for about 3 hours.
That's
You don't
funny.
have to say much when you're just rolling ones. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Still can't take
I thought
me
of
down,
a really
man.
good shirt idea that's just like a D20, but inside the D20 is our logo, like in the angles of the D20 surrounding the one that's facing front, obviously that's been rolled. Picture that.
Nice.
Be a critical
I'm
fail.
gonna make it come to fruition. Speaking of merch, if you're not on our merch site, go to our website. You can find it on our link to all the socials. You can get a link to our merch site from there. We got tons of merch, and by the time you're listening to this, starting November 1st, we have some unbelievable designs coming out. We got a little spaced out campaign. All your favorite designs spaced out. So get onto our merch site. Check them out. They're awesome.
There you
This
go.
guy's pretty fucking excited about Spaced Out. We've been hearing about this for like 6 months.
Braden works really hard on these things.
Yeah, go buy one. All right. Prove these guys wrong and their fucking shitty attitudes.
Hey, some of them look good.
validate my hard work.
They all look good.
Some of them you can't even fucking tell, but that's
Yes,
fine.
you can.
Anyways.
Yes, you can.
We'll see.
It's the subtleness. Listen, I'm sure they're going to be appreciated. So when you listen to this Friday, Saturday, check them out Sunday, November 1st. They'll be on sale to Christmas, and then I'm going to delete them forever out of spite from these guys. So.
I'm sure
You're going to
there'll
delete
be
them forever because they're not going to sell any.
I'm sure there'll be a big bang.
All right, let's get into it. It's a Halloween time. If you're listening to this, it's either the 30th Halloween or just after. So
Spooky.
no Ouija board this year. I think 3 was enough. I don't think we can do it again. So
No, don't think we could ever do it again.
We're going to do it again. Just the cards weren't in the...
Sans me.
it's gonna be hard to get Andrew back on a Ouija session. That's
Fuck
what I'm
that.
saying.
You guys betrayed me. I thought we were friends. That's some bullshit.
Did Ouija 3 ever even go to the public, or is it Patreon only still?
I think it's still on the Patreon. We never
Still
released
locked.
it.
Where it will forever be.
Oh,
Still
listen.
locked in the vaults.
Yeah, if you, it's a good one. If you haven't listened to us play
It's not
the Ouija,
not
the
worth
third
listening.
time,
Not funny. Not good.
it's
Not clever. Nothing. Terrible.
both good and funny.
It's my favorite thing we've ever done.
Nope. Yeah, because you're mean. Because you're
Yeah.
a fucking mean, bad person. That's why.
But anyways, it's spooky season, so it's time to take on a spooky topic. What's spookier than a bunch of witches?
A bunch of witches located in colonial Massachusetts. We're talking about the Salem Witch Trials. Occurred between 1692 and 1693. This kind of craze, or you could probably say hysteria, which overtook the area of Salem. At the time was Salem Village, which is now present day Danvers. What we know as Salem now, present day Salem, is actually what was known then as the actual Salem town itself. So now this entire, I don't know, a phenomenon, I guess you could call it. If you're from the
Panic?
USA, panic. If you're from the
Hysteria?
United States, though, Salem Witch Trials is pretty much like well known. It's something if for me, for existence, I'm pretty sure in the United States and the US education system, you have to read The Crucible at some point. The 1953 stage play, Broadway play, The Crucible, which is a dramatized version of the Salem Witch Trials themselves, featuring a lot of names and characters that were actually based on actual people of the time.
So let me get this straight. You guys are learning about fucking Salem Witch Trials, and we're learning about Louis Real and the Coureurs de Bois.
And
That's
fucking
some fucking
the Hudson
bullshit.
and Portageon and how to make
Yeah.
fucking pea soup and bannock.
Fuck's sake. Not fair.
It's funny. Dan was like, "Oh, you had to learn about this in school, right?" I was like, "We were learning about the fur trade, motherfucker.
Yeah, but
There was no
about
witches in
witches.
Canada. Just people are peeling beavers back to make hats. That's it. That's all that happened from time settlers came to Canada till 1773 or whenever the fuck they stopped doing it."
Hudson's Bay Company, pal. It's all there.
It's still going.
Yeah.
Yep.
HBC.
Get yourself a cool blanket. Bunch of colors.
So it was interesting for me to learn that this is like a widely taught subject in like, I guess in social studies. You guys have the same thing? Is that, or do you just call it history? Whatever you call it in fucking
Yeah, we
middle
have
school.
a social studies, or in my school when I went to, when I was in high school, it was usually the English department lined up with the history department, talking about pre-revolution United States, where they would talk about the Salem Witch Trials and the Puritan colonization of the northeast of America, the United States, and then you'd have the Crucible would go in there, it would line right up. So you talk about the that kind of thing. So,
Well, I'm really glad we're doing this case file, because as far as I was concerned, the only witches were the Hex Girls and the Sanderson sisters. So I'm glad I got to fucking expand my witch knowledge a bit.
your witch knowledge. So the Salem Witch Trials themselves fall on the end of, they started in 1792, right? And at this time in the Northeast United, right? 1690. What did I say? 1792.
1692.
No,
1692.
1600.
Right. I've been drinking. That's fair. This is gonna be a fun ride.
'Tis the season.
Greatest beer in all of the world.
So now the Salem Witch Trials, if you think about it, everybody, I think most people, when you think of witch trials, or witch hunts, you think of this. If you think of the Salem Witch Trials, Salem witch hunts, but actually these were not the first kind of witch hunts of their kind. They're not even the most, seriously, not the probably not the most deadly, I guess you could call it. Europe had its heyday of witch hunts between 1400 and 1775, maybe. These were kind of like the times that you had your great witch hunts. Probably some of the biggest ones were in Germany, what is now present day Germany, and Hungary at the time. Those ones, you had probably at least 2,000 people being executed on the account of being accused of witchcraft or convicted of witchcraft.
Not the Germans.
They were burning witches and killing witches for hundreds of years. It's crazy.
Yeah, you're saying they were burning witches and digging ditches?
For sure.
Slamming in the back. My
Dracula. Of what is his story, Hungary?
Yeah, hundreds of years of witch hunts throughout Europe. It's fucking crazy that they would blame, like, pretty much anything bad, you just blame a witch, and then you could just say, like, she's a witch, and then there wasn't really much of a trial.
It was literally the easiest time in history to be a doctor.
100%.
Honest to God.
So jealous.
Because if someone came in and you didn't have the slightest idea of what was going on, you would go, gotta be witchcraft.
Has to be. It only makes sense.
No other explanation.
No. I bet you they like put effort into too, like maybe like had some old timey stethoscope, had to listen to the lungs, maybe took a blood pressure with whatever they took a blood pressure, sat there and pondered for a second. You're like, yeah, it definitely has to be the witchcraft. Yeah. Burn her.
Burn the person that's come in.
Yeah. Burn her. Kill her.
Get rid of her. Witch.
And, people around that time, science was advancing at probably what could probably be seen as a remarkable rate at that time. Science and skepticism were kind of taking their root in some of the American colonies and in Europe themselves. When the Salem Witch Trials, began, Europe was kind of already, their witch trials had already kind of winded down. I think even in the American colonies, you didn't really have people accused of witchcraft before the last one before the Salem Witch Trials themselves was probably like, there was a trial for a witch. It was probably like 30 years before the Salem Witch Trials themselves.
Of course, North America's slow to catch up. It's just like rock and roll. They were doing such cool shit in Europe and then took us forever to catch on. Thank God for Led Zeppelin.
So you had the Salem Witch Trials really pick up speed probably around January 1692, very beginning. You have Reverend Paris, who is the reverend to Salem Village at the time, and his daughter Elizabeth, who was age 9, and her niece Abigail Williams started having what people kind of described as fits. They screamed, they were throwing things. People said they uttered peculiar sounds, contorted themselves or their faces into strange positions, and like we've already asserted, local doctors back then, it's like the only thing that could cause this is supernatural causes.
9-year-old girls throwing fits.
Witchcraft.
I mean, did they try to fucking leech them first?
No leeching. I think leeching had fallen out of fashion at that point.
All right.
Another girl to join the ranks of the two daughters or the two young girls was also Ann Putnam, age 11, who's they said experienced similar episodes. Now you had the actual trials. You had after you had the girls throwing their fits, they started leveling accusations at other locals of Salem Village at the time. And you didn't really have the trials begin until February 29th.
I really love how they got. So I don't want to skip over anything, but it turns out that one of the people that are accused in this situation right off the bat was one of their, was it Reverend Parrish? His slave, Chichuba was her name. And she devised a scheme to actually help them find out who this witch was. And you know how she decided, how the number one witch hunting tool that she had and they came up with?
Well, from my experience, with anything in life, you fight fire with fire.
Yeah, I guess.
You fight fire with cake.
To be more specific, piss cake.
Piss cake?
100% piss cake.
They
What do you
baked
mean?
a piss cake.
You bake a piss cake.
They baked a piss
And then
cake, and then you feed it to a dog. You bake a piss cake, you feed it to a dog. Obviously, they didn't have any SPCA back then because they would have been all up these guys' asses. Because you can't be feeding dogs piss cake. That's not okay.
And the thought was, so she got pee from the daughter who was experiencing these symptoms,
The afflicted.
the afflicted, baked the old piss cake, fed it to the dog, and then if the dog experienced the same symptoms, there you have it.
That's it. Case closed.
Case closed, and I'm free to go, I guess.
I don't know. Like,
Safe to say it didn't really work.
No. Oh, that's good.
if the piss cake makes you shit, you must acquit.
I also think it's important to make the distinction that this kind of, I guess you could call it white magic, was considered non-offensive. Like there were certain types of witchcraft back in the 1600s, 1500s. There was a very well-defined what was considered witchcraft and what wasn't. So like the kind of witch cake thing was kind of towing the line. That was considered white magic. Yeah. Fortune telling, divination, these kind of things were all sort of considered. It wasn't exactly, it was kind of skirting the line. You were consorting with the devil. These powers, these abilities that you could perhaps the information that you could glean from these were considered dark arts, but it wasn't complete. You weren't in thrall.
Something that's really important in this era right now, especially in Salem, was it was a Puritan culture, right? Like these guys were Bible thumping fucking Puritans.
Yeah, this magic, that type of white magic was God approved. The dark magic, the witchcraft, not God approved.
Well, I mean,
it wasn't
God
exactly approved. It was just kind of like
God turns a blind eye to that white magic. You don't get burned for those ones.
There was
not for long.
The Puritans, like they lived strict devout followers of like the Bible, right? And North America, from what I read, in their opinion, was basically the devil's territory. Yet they still chose to live there for some.
Well,
reason.
They moved from Europe, right? They moved from Europe because they felt like
they were incorporating. They felt that the church was incorporating too much of Catholic practices.
Yeah, they were very much of the attitude that the Church of England was becoming essentially too tolerant. So they all kind of moved out and,
so they're like staunch conservatives.
As staunch as it comes.
Yeah.
We're talking cutting holes in sheets here.
Yeah.
Yes, but they were also, I mean, you probably wouldn't have, they wouldn't have had a lot of the success in their colonization of northeastern United States if it weren't for the kind of discipline. A lot of historians attribute the way making their colonies successful to their actual kind of Puritan work ethic and the way that they lived, their kind of the lifestyle that was dictated by their religion. Back then, it was very important within the Puritan religion to one of their tenets was like to be able to read the Bible for yourself and be able to interpret it and be able to kind of argue your points based on the Bible, to make your faith your own was kind of one of the things that they really tried to hammer home in their culture. So that actually contributed to them having a 90% literacy rate within that area of the United States. So Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, everybody could pretty much read because it was almost it was within your best interest, or it's like, that's the only way you're getting into heaven is that you are being able to read.
Braden's out.
What? Oh, fuck.
You're done, son.
What? Oh, well. That's
No
right.
big deal. I'm out
It's going
too.
to be more fun at the other place.
Yeah, I'm out. I'll join you down there.
It's a bad day for witches in the Puritan society because following the word of the Bible, that law, basically the Bible says like, fucking burn the witches, kill the witches.
Smite them.
Don't let them live. It says right in there. So the second that, they start to think, or someone's like, God damn, this looks like witchcraft to me. Basically, everyone there is like, well, there's only one solution. Kill him.
No in between.
Well, not necessarily. So you had the three girls. They were brought in February 29th, and they leveled their accusations at not only Tituba, but also Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne, were the three that were the beginning of the Salem Witch Trials that kind of began the whole thing.
So important to point out too that Tituba was Reverend Parrish's slave. Sarah Good was a pregnant beggar who used to go knocking on doors.
By all accounts, was a fucking bitch.
And then Sarah Osgood, she actually Osborne, her husband died early, and he left the property to her and promised that she would leave the property to her children, or to their children. She ends up meeting an Irish immigrant and,
A gentleman suitor.
Yeah, and takes the kids to court and tries to keep the property. So these are, you know what I mean? She's already not really painted in a good light. So these are three, what are you going to say? Like, I'm going to say easy targets. Outcasts, people who would be easy to segregate.
Right. And as Braden said, and Braden mentioned, Sarah Good was often kind of identified or people kind of called her a bit, she could be, confrontational, temperamental, but she also had good reason for being that, or what you could say would be good reason. Like Sarah Good, before, a lot of people think of her as like a homeless beggar, or some articles would describe her as that, but actually before she became homeless, like when she was growing up, she grew up in a very well-to-do household. Unfortunately for her, her father committed suicide, and which left a kind of pretty much dark mark on her the dark mark, household. And then she wasn't able really to get married. She ended up having, they lost their well-standing, the standing that they did have. And then she had to marry a impoverished, a pretty much recently released indentured servant at the time. He ended up dying as well, and then left her in debt. And then her third husband, that she took his last name, Good, and then he had to actually sell his farm in order to pay off her debts. So
Damn.
He had to essentially work for her and their two children. They didn't really have a home. They were homeless, and there were times where they had to stay in barns or mangers or whatever to kind of make ends meet. And she was often that's kind of one of the things that historians kind of put on her, is that she seemed to often kind of she would curse people, as you would, that weren't eager to help her. Like she would ask for help or something.
Shake a fist.
I think there's definitely a report of her. She asked Reverend Parris for something. They had an argument, and then she left kind of muttering something under her breath. I think she was very prone to muttering, and he took that as later to be, he took that later to being some sort of she had muttered some type of curse at him. So you had these three women who probably during that time would be, yes, considered social outcasts at some point. They were interrogated for several days, starting in March 1st. So then Osborne claimed that she was innocent, and so did Good. But under what you would probably say now, under duress, Tituba actually confessed to participating in some dark rituals with the devil.
And she also said that there was other people trying to bring down the Puritans, like other witches.
She did, in fact, admit to dancing with the devil in the pale moonlight. She did.
Jack Nicholson was there.
Mm-hmm.
Now they had a hearing, like she confessed, like in like a public hearing. It wasn't a trial, but it was a public hearing. An interesting thing is that the three girls were present, and they would ask, what's her name again? Tituba. They would ask her, like, what did the devil come to you as? She'd be like, a man dressed in black with dark hair. And they'd be like, was there anything? Did he come to you anyway? And she'd say, sometimes as a crow or an eagle,
a black
or
dog,
a raven, and then a giant black dog. And the girls in court would start like chanting, like a giant black dog, a bird, this and that, and they would start acting up, like all three of them. I found that peculiar, and I found that we can get into theories later, but I found that very interesting that in court these girls were basically uncontrollable. These two 11-year-olds and a 9-year-old would start like chanting in unison.
They're summoning familiars
at the hearing when Tituba is confessing and describing how she interacted with the devil.
So now you had her confession was enough. Like there are historians that theorize that if she wouldn't have confessed, that perhaps this wouldn't have really amounted to all that much. But Tituba actually confessing and then leveling out even more accusations among the community of Salem Village led to what, it was kind of the match to spark the entire thing.
Here's the thing, though. I was confused on this point because a couple of things I was reading said she leveled accusations, but then some of the stuff I read that just said she just had said that she had seen other names in the devil's book, and that's what she had said, which then sparked the fear of like, well, then who were the other names? So I wasn't sure if she pointed fingers or she was just like there was others helping the devil.
Right. So that's what I meant. So it was like she said that she had seen other names in the books. I don't think she specifically named everybody, but once that she said that there were other names in that book, anybody could be accused of witchcraft at this point. And
from my understanding of how that worked is once the devil comes and meets you, Zell, take some notes.
Pen out.
Once the devil comes and meets you, and you put your name in his book, you basically give him authority to take your likeness and then torment people in your shape.
Ah, that's how it works.
Isn't part of that as well? You get a sweet extra teat.
yeah, technically, yeah.
Yeah.
Devil's teat.
The devil's teat.
That is one of the sources, or what you would say, of evidence that a lot of the investigators searched for was what they called the devil's teat. So they were.
I got one.
I got one.
You guys want to see it?
Is it a dangler in your armpit?
No, it's back there. It's on my back. It's a little devil's teat.
Yeah, they like said anyone with like a skin. They're looking for skin tags or like weird moles, and they would call that the devil's teat.
Essentially, yeah. Anything that was any type of strange skin marking. I heard also that it could essentially be like a bite from a tick or something, like anything that they could find that was strange on there.
It's one of two things: melanoma or the devil's teat. There's no other.
Really enjoying how many times we've said teat in the last 2 minutes. It's my favorite.
But even birthmarks, they would be like, if you had an unsightly birthmark, they're like,
devil's teat.
That's a teat of a devil.
It's for your familiars to suck upon.
I mean, if we want to talk about, exciting teats, one of the other accused that stood forth was Bridget Bishop. and she was actually examined for devil's marks, teats sucked by a Satan or the witch's familiar. And then after what they called a diligent search, they found her witch's teat, reported to be right there on the taint.
On the taint. She had a teat on the taint.
Yep.
She had a devil's teat on her taint.
Devil's
The old
teat.
taint teat.
Ah, okay.
It's a good spot. You don't look there very often.
Inconspicuous.
But then when they re-examined her, miraculously it disappeared.
Miraculous.
Interesting.
Okay.
So yeah, you can say that. So check your taints for teats if you're looking for witches.
Yeah. So basically, I don't know if we talked about how devil's teats work, but essentially, like small rodents or other agents of the devil,
Familiars.
It could be any type of familiars, birds, toads.
Yeah,
dogs.
will come. Are they sucking blood? Is that what they are?
It's the devil's milk.
Or just life force?
It's devil's milk.
Some sweet devil's milk
From the
off your
teat.
body after you've signed your soul away for a pair of Air Jordans and a hand job.
Well, that's how you feed your familiars. You're casting find familiar. You're getting your wolves, rodents, birds, anything. Great spell.
That's how they sustain themselves.
Great spell. Find familiar.
Everything we know about witches, we learned from D&D. So we talked about Bridget Bishop, and Bridget Bishop was actually the first one to become hanged during these proceedings, and what became known as Gallows Hill on June 10th. She, till the end, declared, or professed her innocence. Like she 100%, she was like, these girls are lying. I'm innocent. You shouldn't believe them. I've never consorted with the devil. There's all this is I shouldn't even be accused of this. Like she had actually been accused of witchcraft before, which didn't really help her case in the first place, but she had been accused of witchcraft back in 1679, but then she'd been acquitted for lack of evidence.
They didn't find a teat on her taint.
You're telling me that there wasn't any spectral evidence, Dan?
Exactly. And I was going to say that we should probably talk about the types of evidence that you would want to admit in a court of witchcraft. There was a very specific type of evidence that is brought up many times in the Salem Witch Trials,
only
which
evidence
was known as
ever.
Not the only evidence, but it was a large, there's probably a disproportionate amount of the evidence is what is known as spectral evidence.
Seems legit.
Which is essentially any type of evidence that is brought forth that is the result of dreams or visions or types of supernatural occurrences that happen to people.
Oh man.
So I mean, you could pretty much say that, oh, she attacked me in my dreams at night, and that would have as much weight as somebody being witnessing that actual event.
Your
or something
witchcraft.
like that. Right. So
I quickly had to search spectral evidence because that'd be the greatest name of a podcast. It's already a podcast.
Oh, of course.
FYI.
Go check out spectral evidence.
It's probably awesome.
Say we sent
you.
We sent you.
So let me get this straight. Back in 1692, guy comes home from work. He's having a bad day. He's annoyed. He comes home. His wife says, when are you going to take out the garbage? I got this list of shit for you to do. Guy doesn't want to do it. Weighs his options. Calls the doctor. I think she's a witch. It's the only thing that makes sense. I saw her in my dream. She tried to choke me. She's sitting on my chest. We got to figure this shit out, man.
I think back in those days, you just hate your wife. I don't think women weren't treated very well in 1600s. I think that's a historical fact. So I don't think it was.
Even the Puritans?
I don't think it was.
Even the Puritans, women were not exactly
children.
First
children were not like, oh, this is my child. I love them. It was like, this motherfucker is paying the bills.
Buddy,
get out to the field and do some work.
This kid ruined my life.
Listen, you're a sinner, you little motherfucker, and you better get to work to repent.
Buddy, these,
they didn't give a shit.
They're not children. They're fucking yard equipment. You know what I mean? Like you had your new kid. You're like, this is my new plow. Fuck yeah.
So it's like it was. I think it was easier to level accusations against your neighbor, to be like, listen, whatever. Hey, George next door, did you see his lawn? The motherfucker doesn't mow it ever.
Which?
I had a bad dream. George is in it. He's a witch.
Burn him. Drown
You know
him.
what the best part about this
Stone
whole
'em.
thing is that I learned that they didn't actually burn anyone.
No,
Nobody got burned at the stake.
there was no burning.
There was
No,
not one
not this
witch burnt in this whole Salem.
just
the
hung
only
and
way to kill
tortured.
witches back then was hanging until dead.
or piling with rocks.
Well,
Or crushing
that-
you with weight.
so if we want to talk about that one, is it Giles?
Yeah, guy's a badass.
We're talking about Giles Corey.
Guy's a badass.
Giles Corey was accused of witchcraft. He was indicted along with his wife Martha, and he pleaded not guilty. And so back then, around this time, you couldn't really proceed with the trial unless you kind of had like you couldn't try him with a jury unless he kind of said something like he would admit to be tried by a jury.
You needed spectral evidence.
Well, not exactly. It's
That's like the word.
They kind of ask him like a customary question, and it's like, would you be willing to be tried by God and my country? And you know, that being a jury. And without answering that, he didn't answer it. He just decided to go mute at that point. He just like, I'm not going to answer that. Then technically back then under their law, the trial couldn't proceed. So what they did was traditionally under these circumstances is what they would use the English practice of what is called piene forte et dure, which means strong and hard punishment, which is essentially laying a person down, putting a plank on top of them, and then placing heavy rocks on top of that plank.
Yeah, what's the one dude?
What?
What's the one dude's name they killed with that?
That the guy
That's
we're talking
Giles
about.
Corey.
Giles.
Yeah,
So
okay,
we're talking
yeah.
greatest-
So this guy, his last words, more weight.
Dude, he kept saying it. They kept asking him. They're like, will you fucking confess? Will you confess? And he's like, more weight.
More weight.
Because, you know, there's a reason behind that,
badass.
though, because I guess if he were to be tried as a witch, he would have lost all his property. They would have took all his belongings and his property, so he held on, and that way his property and shit was passed on to his kids.
Oh.
Like, what a
So he
badass.
sacrificed himself by being crushed to death.
Slowly.
Slowly crushed to death.
Like over days. Guy's a badass.
fucked up.
Guy's a fucking badass.
So, like Andrew mentioned, yes, it was. It's somewhat of a misconception that if the trials, like if you're accused of witchcraft, you would lose your property upon the conviction, and this was true under English common law, that a convicted felon would be forfeit in their personal estate, but it would go to the king. Like it wouldn't necessarily go to anybody else. But, you know, so if you were convicted of a crime or something like that, it would go. This kind of comes into play later, where some historians believe, you know, people would say that, some of these people were accused of witchcraft because people specifically wanted their land. Like back then, specifically during this period, probably from like 1670 to like 1690, right after the Salem Witch Trials, Salem itself, or what they called like the Dominion of New England, like that area, it was the fucking Wild West. Like they had almost no laws. Like Salem itself, the town and its city they had their charter, which had been written when they had colonized the place, that had actually been revoked. They were in the process of instituting a new charter from England that was supposed to kind of come down after they got assigned a new governor. That didn't happen. So that at the time that these trials were happening, they really didn't have any type of documentation. They didn't have any type of kind of protocols of which to follow. They just kind of had precedents, like they had stuff they could go off of from historic trials from England or a couple that had happened before. But at this point, a lot of the minutia and the who was responsible for what, like, didn't. A lot of that, the procedures that happened, a lot of it was kind of stuff that you would consider like this shouldn't happen. This shouldn't have happened under the original charter or a new law. Like, you would not have a lot of the people who were judges, people who were on the jury were actually related to some of the people who were accusers and some of the people who were actual the accused. Like, you wouldn't have had that under. There was a lot of strange, I don't want to call it strange, but unorthodox things that were going on during the trials. And
said, like, when we get into our theories of what the possibilities are, like, I'll talk at great length about the High Sheriff George Carwin, because he was the one signing the warrants, right, and executing some of these people. And he was going in, like, after arresting these people, and they would be held in the jail they'd be held for days and days and days and months. The jail that was built there was never meant to hold these, like, people for this kind of amount of time. And this motherfucker, if you wanted a better bed, if you wanted better food, you had to pay for your stay in jail.
Yeah, you were obligated to pay what amounted to rent. Like, you had to pay jail fees.
Yes. And then on top of this, George Corwin, illegally, even at the times, during the times, after you would be accused of being a witch, this high sheriff would go into your home and seize some of your stuff for himself. And he was working directly with the magistrate, who was also running your trial of being accused for witchcraft. Like, to me, like, it's whatever was happening in Salem, there was something evil taking place, because when you look at the actions of the people in charge of these trials, I'm like, they were profiting from people being accused by essentially stealing all your stuff the second you were accused.
So these Puritans were not so pure. Little greed taking hold. Okay, let's take a quick beer break, and we'll come back and we'll finish off with the rest of the story and our theories. We'll be right back.
The comfort of your favorite seat is now your comfy car selling command center, thanks to Carvana.
It doesn't get any better than this.
Your favorite seat's the best spot in the house. Make it even better by entering your license plate or VIN and getting a real offer in minutes.
There really is no place like home.
And speaking of home, Carvana will pick up your car from yours after you finalize your offer. Visit Carvana.com or download the app and sell your car from your comfy place. The comfort of your favorite seat is now your comfy car selling command center, thanks to Carvana.
It doesn't get any better than this.
Your favorite seat's the best spot in the house. Make it even better by entering your license plate or VIN and getting a real offer in minutes.
There really is no place like home.
And speaking of home, Carvana will pick up your car from yours after you finalize your offer. Visit Carvana.com or download the app and sell your car from your comfy place.
We're back.
So now you have these accusations flying around about people. Who's a witch? She's a witch. She's a witch. He's a witch. All this kind of stuff going all down.
So wait, do they call? I thought, like, is a male a witch too? They don't call it a warlock, or in this case, everyone's just a witch.
I don't think warlock actually kind of came into it. It was kind of like, well, you're not necessarily. I don't think they called them a witch. They were more like the men who were considered
he's a wizard
by the devil.
Wizard badge. That'd be fucking dope.
Well, they did use the term sorcerer. Like, I think they used the term sorcerer as opposed to warlock.
I'm telling you right now,
like, I don't think warlock kind of came.
No fucking warlocks got their letters to go to Hogwarts. All right, it's fucking witches and wizards, pal. That's it.
All right, fair.
So, and into the middle of this, you introduce William Phipps, who became the new governor of like the Salem area. So William Phipps at the time He plays an important role in all of this. William Phipps was pretty much a rock star at that time. He had made his fortune actually raising a Spanish galleon. And he made a shitload of money. The dude was like I don't know, he's probably like the Richard Branson of colonial Massachusetts, essentially. And so he made all this money, and then he used this kind of money to kind of further his entire kind of political career. He joined the influential, is it the North Church of the area that was kind of headed up by included, what's his name? Cotton Mathers.
Oh,
who was
Cotton.
the minister, one of them.
Cotton.
Yeah, Cotton Mathers.
Bold strategy,
And his father,
Cotton.
Increase Mathers. Is his name Increase? Puritan. I looked this up there. I thought it's a fun little fact, but it's like you have a lot of when you go into like the Puritan names, they're all insanely crazy. Like you have people called Increase Mathers. Like you had people called, I came across other names like, if Jesus didn't sacrifice for your sins, thou be damned. Like that was an entire first name. That was somebody's first name.
There was also a name Dorcas.
That's great.
Dorcas as well.
That's an awesome name.
Cotton, these really unorthodox names that you had Puritans giving their progeny is nuts. And I looked it up and I was like, it's actually a thing that they had, that it was a belief that they held that the traditional names from English history and things like that, they felt were too earthly. So they started giving their children like more kind of, they named them after perhaps like, more like emotions, or they'd even give them like things like sins, like a humiliation, or but we do which sounds and crazy. Like, why would you name your kid Humiliation, Smith or Humiliation Johnson or something like that? But actually, a lot of the names that do survive, you have a lot of actually good names that like Faith, Constance,
Mercy,
Verity, Mercy. These names that are actually Puritan names that were brought over here and have survived. Dorcas,
Of course.
which I'll name my firstborn at some point, I guess. It's a cool name.
sounds about right.
So you had William Phipps. Rock star
That's what I'm going to start calling you from now on. Dork work.
and I'm fine. With that. It's a good Puritan name.
Great
Strong Puritan name. All right. William Phipps comes back into this. He becomes the new governor of the area. He convenes what is known as the Court of Oyer and Terminer, which means to hear and determine in Old Northern French, which was still used in court terminology of the day. And that's actually where we get the phrase "hear ye," which is, in the United States, we use it to begin court proceedings. Like it originally was like, "Oyez, oyez," but now it's "hear ye, hear ye." He comes in this. He begins this kind of, I guess you could call it like an intermediate court. Right then, he had brought back a type of charter to kind of regain or reinstitute law and order, which the colony was kind of being lacking at this point. And so you had this court trying these witches, and after the fact that Tituba had actually confessed that there were witches, it's almost like witches were coming out of the woodwork. You had people just coming out everywhere accusing brother against brother, sister against sister, which I find people, it's like, oh, relatives were accusing relatives of being witchcraft. But back then, everybody, surprisingly, in my research, was related. Somebody was the cousin of somebody was the sister of somebody. Like back then, it's like everybody was related to everybody.
Like small villages and like what? Because like what did Salem have? Maybe like a couple thousand. Like the town of Salem, maybe a couple thousand, and the farms around maybe a few hundred.
Yeah, everybody was somebody's cousin or somebody's nephew, somebody's niece. Like they were all related because it was a colony, very
bunch
small.
of cousin fuckers is what you're saying.
Maybe.
Probably.
He's like, I don't want to commit to that.
I guess it's easy to accuse everybody of being witches.
Fluent in the family tree of Puritan family trees, but I'm sure there's some
shenanigans
stuff going
happening
on
back
yeah.
then.
Well, it's probably
there's some mixed up stuff.
easy
going
to
on
accuse
there.
everybody of being witches when they look like the people from The Hills Have Eyes. A lot of inbreeding.
So the court of Oyer and Terminator started its first session on June 2nd, and they heard the case of Bridget Bishop, which we talked about. It was the eventually she was not the first witch accused, but they felt like her case was the first one that presented the strongest evidence for conviction. And so she was charged, and like we said, she had been charged before, so it was kind of natural for her to be charged again. Well, it's like if you were charged for witchcraft back then, we might as well just kind of
So there's no double jeopardy for witches?
No, there's no double jeopardy for witches.
Bullshit.
They said that the most damning evidence that came against her was she had hired John Bly and his son William Bly to carry out some repairs on her home. And when they said that when they took down a section of the cellar wall, they had found holes between stones, which they removed several poppets. And so poppets are kind of, a poppet. So if you've watched Pirates of the Caribbean, they refer to people as they refer to Elizabeth.
Hello, Poppet.
Hello, Poppet.
Yeah. Hello, poppet. A poppet is a type of small doll, which can be made of either birch bark or probably rags or things like that. So it's like a small doll. They also say they can be made of, but these ones were made of hog's bristles, and they had headless pins in them which point outward. So essentially, what you're looking at would be what you refer to now as a voodoo doll.
See, I would have been more excited if you would have been like, the contractors came, they realized the side of her house was made out of gingerbread, so they fucking knew right away. This bitch is after Hansel and Gretel. It's not good. She's a witch.
Oh, the Puritan witches were a little bit more clever to make their houses out of gingerbread. It's like, oh, they suspect me right away.
Are you going to kill all the little fat Bradens? That's how you get them. Hey, we know you're sexy skinny Braden now, but old Braden, he would have fell for a gingerbread house.
Actually, I didn't lose any weight. This is all a filter on the camera.
That's
It's
fair.
he's figured out a lot with his new computer and the drop 15 pounds filter.
So the Blys were actually asked to produce the poppets, but they couldn't. They didn't have them. They don't have them. So, yeah. But two of them had saw it. They both claimed to have seen these poppets, so that was good enough. Back then, I think under English law, it was pretty much the only way you could convict a witch was through either confession or witness by at least two or more people. So you had two people. Yeah.
What about the spectral evidence, though? Good like if you saw it in your dreams, are other people seeing the same dreams? Yeah, but
that's one person. So that's one witness. Like, that's a witness.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's only one person.
So you had to have at least two people having the same spectral.
So if you had another person come to court and is like, I also dreamed the dream that she haunted me, fucking done.
Witch.
Dead.
Right. And then they had, again, Bridget Bishop was accused of having the witch's teeth on her taint. So she was also that. So they said that was enough.
But it came off
to convict her.
Mysteriously came off.
So June 10th, she was found guilty. Sheriff Corwin, Braden's buddy, led her from the jail to the outskirts of Salem, and then she was hung there.
Fucking sad.
So
just ridiculous. This is so ridiculous.
And not the funny thing, but one of the more macabre things was that during this time in the summer of this year, it was remarked to be a very hot summer. So they were trying to hang these people and they were trying to bury them as quick as possible. It was a remarkably hot summer. So they were trying to bury these people to get them in the ground as fast as possible before, because they had no place to keep them. The jails were full with people waiting for trial of other witches. So they couldn't really put them back in there. And they were like, we got to put them in the ground before they blow it up and start making a stink.
So is that why they jumped right to hanging? Like what separated these witches from the witches in jail? Was it like severity of their action, or was it just the fact that they had nowhere to put them?
They'd been convicted and found guilty.
It was which ones they kind of went in order. Like they had these witches in jail, but then they kind of the order of the trials were those that, like, for Bridget Bishop, it was they decided to do her first because it was the the amount of evidence against her. They're like, this is the easiest to become. It would be easiest to convict her.
Listen,
this case should be the average witch case probably took like half a day.
Yeah, well, like they got some damning evidence. Like they didn't even see this shit in a dream. They saw it in real life. They don't have it, but they saw it. They synced it. They synced it.
So you have all this crazy shit going down. Yeah. So you have her dead, and a number of other ones would end up following her to Gallows Hill, and it's just a really. Those who didn't die on Gallows Hill were actually you had these trials going on for months, and there were a number of them who died actually in jail waiting for trials or waiting for execution, or those who just like they didn't have enough proof at the time to kind of convict them of witchcraft. The Salem jails were not a place that you wanted to stay.
Could imagine.
Absolutely. It was remarked on at that point. There are people who had written about the conditions that the people were staying in. Like, you might have a chamber pot in there. I mean, you pretty much were like shitting in the corner. They didn't really give you any blankets or thing like that. Really basic food. And a lot of the women who were staying there, you had like elderly women, people who
pregnant,
were, just pregnant women.
At one time, there was a 4-year-old in there
named Dorcas.
A fucking 4-year-old.
Seriously,
there was a 4-year-old. Dorcas.
Her name was Dorcas, and they said she went insane in the jail.
You imagine you just had this new baby, and you're like, "Oh yeah, this is my baby Dorcas." That's a dumb name. She must be a witch. Put her in jail.
Yeah, you too. But yeah, like it was not uncommon. Like if you had a child, like they would just send your child with you into jail.
Yeah, it was not unusual to find people in there that was like a lot. Some of the people who were even imprisoned for witchcraft were kind of it was recorded that they were essentially simple. Like they were simple, like they were mentally handicapped at some point. Like it was just people that they're like, there's no way you should have these people in that jail. Like these people, there's no way they could be witches.
These are supposedly devout, wholesome, good people throwing children and, challenged people and just pregnant in jail. Like this is so fucked.
All right. Should we start getting into theories?
There's one. I think there's one more important thing. There's Rebecca Nurse, I think, which is probably Rebecca Nurse's execution is probably the most, besides the Burroughs, the Reverend Burroughs' execution. I think hers is probably the most.
Yeah, his was pretty exceptional too, though. We should probably talk about that a little bit.
Rebecca Nurse was executed with her. Shit, I just lost my place. Sorry, no, not Rebecca Nurse. I want to talk about Sarah Good.
Oh, yes.
Sarah Good.
That I was going to talk about that for my theory, but let's do it.
Right. So Sarah Good was convicted of witchcraft, and she was actually given one last chance to confess that she was a witch. She did not confess her a witch. Whole time she maintained her innocence throughout her entire trial. Nicholas Noyes, who was the junior minister of Salem town at the time, offered her this last chance on the gallows to admit her guilt. And she, quote, said that you're a liar. She replied to him, I am no more a witch than you are a wizard. And if you take away my life, God will give you blood to drink.
Ooh.
And people would remember this because they would remember that exact quote because years later, Noyes actually suffered an internal hemorrhage and he died choking on his own blood.
Ooh.
That sounds like the work of a witch.
I'd say.
I would even say their only fault was not to burn her sooner or hang her sooner. They let her get another curse off.
Yeah, it was just a really crazy time at this point. Like it stuff started getting really out of hand for a long time, and stuff didn't really calm down until like almost England had to get involved. Like the actual crown had to get involved and be like, what the fuck is happening over in Salem? Like we've just heard reports of people, but there's a bunch of fucking witches. What is happening? And Phipps had to write back and actually take a stand and be like, and the governor at the time, William Phipps, had to take a stand and actually say like, well, not really. Like stuff's kind of calming down at this point. William Phipps had actually been, what he said, he was been busy kind of reinforcing and building forts along the northern frontier there in Maine and stuff like this, which had all been burnt down in the previous Indian Wars. And even though he had been present at a lot of the trials, he'd actually been there for most of the trials. And he had to kind of put out this fire of witchcraft to maintain order within the colony itself. So it was just like a really bizarre thing that happened. There was this strange confluence of events that really led to this. There's a ton of other weird shit. We'll get into that in theories, like what happened, what actually happened.
And like to get into the theory for me, the irony of like this, on the face value, this Puritan society of like devout followers of God, but then immediately under that, you know, that hump, that face is this like dark underbelly of like accusing your neighbors of witchcraft, and just like without real kind of due process, you're just like, witch, done. You're in jail. Officers are coming in, stealing your stuff, and you're sitting in jail to trial. And then basically you're like, if you confess, we won't kill you. But if you don't confess, we're going to kill you. There's like such an evil to that it's like, if there was some sort of like entity or dark presence operating in Salem in this time, you think that's the kind of atmosphere that they would thrive in. Like that's what they would want. The interesting thing for me is the confession of, what the fuck's her name again? Tituba. Because she confesses, and I know there's, you know, we can talk about false confessions under duress and all that kind of stuff, but she goes into such detail. And the reason I brought it up earlier is because let's not forget, like in the court proceedings, and this is documented, the 9-year-old and the 2 11-year-olds are almost uncontrollable, chanting, repeating what she says in unison. To me, I'm like, it's very freaky. It freaks me out a little bit when I think about that, and I kind of play that scenario through my head. Secondly, this person practiced witchcraft. She learned that from somewhere. And now I'm going to say right now, I've never practiced any kind kind at all.
Liar.
And I'm not going to
Ouija
I'm not
board,
going to
buddy.
I'm
Ouija
okay,
board.
Ouija board.
Dark arts.
But we can get in the merits. I'm not going to sit here and be like, this is all fucking hocus pocus, because there's a bunch of people that I know who have said before, like, this shit's not something you fuck around with. Like, you don't fuck around with this stuff. It's real. And there's a lot of people that believe it's real who take a real interest in practicing it properly. So to me, it's very interesting, her confession. It makes me think that there was, maybe it's not like a witchcraft, maybe it's some sort of possession going on, but something was happening there, because you have seemingly all this really evil, shady stuff going on all at once. This greed, you know, corruption, murder, all this stuff happening in this short amount of time. I found that very interesting. The other thing is, Reverend Paris, I thought was a very interesting figure in the story, because he was just recently had become a reverend, and he was a failed businessman, like kind of.
He's the Donald Trump of his
failed at
time.
everything. Yeah, so he kind of failed at everything else, and he's like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm going to become a reverend. Now he's like, the church he started wasn't really paying him, and they weren't paying him because if the town of Salem paid his salary, it would essentially up the taxes, because there was a church already a little bit away, I guess, in the next town. And most people were like, I'll just go to the other church because I don't want to pay another salary for another reverend and another church because it's not that far to the other church. Now, Reverend Paris actually owed huge amounts of debts. And his excuse for not paying debts, this is unbelievable to me. He had debts to everyone.
You know what's unbelievable to me
And
is you're fucking taking two theories here. And you're shitting all over everybody else's theories. I want you to know that.
Sorry.
No, you ruined it. No, it's fine. You're shitting on other people's theories. You're stealing the limelight. It's fine. Continue.
Ooh.
Continue.
You got to finish your thought, though.
Let's go.
Gotta
Come
finish.
on. Go for it. Let's hear it.
I forgot now. I'm so
Good.
drunk.
Good.
You don't sound that drunk today.
You've derailed him, Andrew. Now
Glad,
it's like
because
now
I
it's
just
a train
spent
wreck.
the last fucking day formulating my theory on this, and the guy's pissing all over it.
No, it's fine. Sorry. I just wanted to get a thought out without saying you know what I mean. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Say it. Say it.
No, I want to hear. I want to know what you mean.
Well, now I'm enthralled in your theory.
You said he had debts. Let's hear it.
So this motherfucker had debts, and he got out of these debts by saying, listen, I can't pay debts unless the town pays me a salary. And everyone's like, you know what? That's fair. So a lot of the initial people accused were people who opposed of paying this motherfucker's salary, right? So very quickly after his slave was, or his housekeep was accused, all these accusations are laid against people that he would benefit from being taken away.
Okay. Can I expand on this a little bit?
Please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's some important things. Something to keep in mind. At this point in time, right before this whole thing took off, Salem Village was an extremely contentious place to live. We had feuding churches, right? Because like Braden was saying, we had a lot of the people lived approximately 10 miles away from this church. So they had to travel. So they came up with the idea, let's start our own church closer to where we live. There was a little bit of a feud between these churches. This new church attempted to get a minister 4 times. Paris was the 4th minister, right? Yep. There was further tension caused by Paris because he delayed in accepting the position because they couldn't work out how he's going to be paid, right? And he was having issues working out disputes between the parishioners. So around October 1691, the town decided to stop paying him, like Braden said, right? There was way more issues because he was perceived as arrogant, greedy. He bought gold candlesticks for the church, all these extravagant stuff where people are like, there's no business needing that. These are Puritans. We don't need any of this fancy stuff, right? So a lot of these villagers were starting to say, hey, you know what? Maybe this is the wrong guy. We don't like him. We're not going to pay him. Let's get rid of him. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is the Salem Witch Trials they all began with Paris's daughter, Betty, her cousin Abigail, right? Both of them related to Paris. Who's the person that came out initially as a witch? Tituba.
I mean, Tituba.
And what did who did Tituba work for?
The devil.
Who did she work for?
Paris.
Reverend Paris.
She worked for Reverend Paris. Okay. Without Tituba coming to the stand and fucking confessing and then calling out the fact that there are more witches, we would have never had this whole fucking thing. We would have sat there with Good and with Tituba and I forget the other Sarah. There's 2 Sarahs and Tituba.
Was Tituba executed?
No, she was kept alive the entire fucking time.
See, then I really like that because that would mean in your scenario here, Reverend Paris had told Tituba, this is what you're going to say.
It's as long as what he told his fucking daughter and his niece.
And in the hearing, he said to his daughter and niece, this is what you're going to do.
But he listened to it.
Where else? You get the belt again.
There definitely was some suspicion that Tituba had been beaten into confession.
She was probably beaten into confession, and she was also...
Or that they had beaten to her to actually confess.
What did she have to gain? She was the only person that kept her life out of the 3 people that were fucking initially accused. she got to
she
live.
was at the end of these trials. She was one of the few survivors. She was sold off to. But the thing is, Paris didn't even want to buy her back. He didn't even pay want to pay her jail fees. So she had to be sold off to another master to recoup her.
And now
her fees.
Another important thing as well is the fact that during the Sarah Good trial, one of the 3 afflicted, I forget which one it was, during the trial started screaming, saying, Sarah Good's evil spirit just stabbed me with a knife. And she pulled out the broken blade from a knife to show the fucking court, saying, look, here's the knife. She stabbed me with it. And another person that was there during the trial was like, whoa, wait a second. Like, I recognize that knife. That's my knife. I broke that knife yesterday and I can fucking go and produce the handle to that knife. And he did.
Oh.
Okay. So, and then like was Braden was saying as well, Paris and Putman had a fucking alliance. They were close. And all these people that ended up getting brought into accusation and hung had issues with either Putman or Paris. And all of them gained off of their deaths.
So they gained because they died as witches, therefore they could claim claim the property.
There were people that had owed debts to them. There were people that they had feuds with. They were just all people that had issues with either Paris or Putman. And Putman was one of the main people that helped him start the new church.
So the two girls, the young girls originally were just that story was just fabricated to start this whole
thing was fabricated
hysteria?
Because again, I don't know if Dan wants to get into it. I won't get into it, or you, but there is a very common theory as to what type of ailment that could have produced these symptoms in the 3 afflicted. And we have to get into that, but you know what I mean? Like, and those symptoms don't necessarily line up with that illness. And it doesn't really work. It's been kind of debunked, but that's the predominant theory in this case.
So that's the theory that the rye of the time produced ergot, which is a fungus, which is actually can produce like hallucinogenic properties and like
it's a derivative of LSD or something.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well that's how they actually discovered LSD, was it not? Like from this fungus they derived LSD back like in the 40s or whatever.
Right. What Andrew's talking about, he's talking about ergot. A couple years ago, a scholar, one academic put forth a theory, or a pretty concrete theory, of like perhaps ergot was the cause for, maybe not the cause, but a contributing factor to the suspicions of witchcraft, like these fits, these hallucinations. These things could actually have been caused or precipitated by the consumption of ergot that had perhaps grown in the rye bread and the conditions, like the swampy, humid conditions of that area at the time.
Well, yeah, they said that, like, so the girl's name is Linda Caporeal, and it was like back in like the 70s or whatever. She was the first to say it. And she says, if you go look at the weather patterns, I guess, or the predicted weather patterns of that time, I don't know how you really find out exactly the weather, but yeah, the right amount of rain and humidity in the soil would produce like this ergot. And she theorized that that's what initially, and because it particularly affects children.
Yes.
And her theory was that the children were affected by this, and that's what initially caused the panic of, they're bewitched, right? And then
mass hysteria kind of spread.
Mass hysteria, and then the theory that I thought about after all that is just the same thing. Like, people use this mass hysteria for personal benefit, and maybe it was caused. If it wasn't caused by actual witches, because we have like in modern day times, like Wicca, like the religion Wicca is like, we have the most amount of witches, but that's a new thing, right? That's only in the last 70 years that this religion has become like dominant. So we have, I think it's like hundreds of thousands of witches, but it's not the same. It's like these people practice, like they're doing Ouija boards and they're like scrubbing, they're doing all, like they're practicing like pagan witchcraft, but that's like a modern thing. So if it wasn't actual witchcraft back then, that people saying that theory of the ergot poisoning maybe started the whole hysteria.
Well, there are some issues with the ergot poisoning though. Like there are some things that don't really line up as far as like,
explain.
So the girls, they shared meals, right? And they shared meals with people who were not hallucinating. So adults and siblings, they had relatives that they ate with that didn't have the same symptoms as them, which didn't really line up. Their health didn't deteriorate. They suffered from the convulsions, which is a neurogenic symptom, and the people suffer from the neurogenic symptoms. Also, they experience those symptoms because they're deficient in vitamin A. Salem was a coastal village, and everybody knows that where do you get the majority of your vitamin A from? Seafood. So that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, they ate a shitload of cod. Like they ate a shitload of fish.
The other issues with ergot is gangrene, which is when tissue in part of the body dies, causes it to go numb, turn black. None of that shit happened. And like you said,
that's only in serious cases, though, right?
Children are particularly susceptible to ergot poisoning, but only 3 of the 11 girls that were in that household got sick. And these we're talking about most of them under the age of 15, right?
Yeah. So the ergot poisoning, I would think, doesn't really line up because there's another. If you go back through the court records, I mean, these are actually well documented proceedings. The Puritans were actually really good at keeping records. Litigation was almost like a hobby to them. So having all these things. Having all these records is not unusual. There's always very well documented. And it almost seemed that if you go through these, that these girls could produce these reactions, these fits were almost like on command
during the court cases. One of the tests that was commonly utilized was what was known as the touch test. And it's like, it would be like if an afflicted person was suffering from their fits, they were having they were being attacked or whatever by a ghost, a specter or whatever in the courtroom, they would have that person touch an accused witch, and if their fit stopped, because the theory was that, or the theory of the day was that the evil energy that was suffusing their body would then return, naturally to the source, because that's where it wants to go, I guess, like electricity, I suppose. But and then their fits would stop. So I mean, if you look at that now, you're like, how is that even an accurate thing? Like, you could just fake being all like, blah, 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 and then like, you touch a person and then you're like, oh, I'm fine. And they're like, oh, they're a witch.
It's gone.
And even if they did I know there's a couple of accounts of them like doing that test and even blindfolding the people and then being like, okay, touch this person. And they would hold the child's hand or the afflicted person's hand to a person. And then even if it wasn't that person, they'd be like, well, or they'd guess, they'd be like, it's not that person. They'd be like, well, okay, we'll try this person. And then this would actually be the actual person. And they'd be like, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, grip harder. And then harder. And then, you could assume that you'd be like, oh, this is the person I'm supposed to be like accusing as a witch.
Right.
So there were a lot of irregularities with the Salem Witch Trials.
Let's just say that, the judicial process back then was somewhat to be desired.
At the time, like I said before, like this specific period, there was a lot of stuff going on where law and order was not exactly the order of the day. Like it was not at the top of the list. It was, they were in the middle of a transition of like judicial codes of governance laws in that colony. Like they had just recently overthrown like a military governor sent over by England, and then who had revoked their original charter. Phipps actually came back with another charter, but the people, like what you would consider conservative Puritans of the day, and people said that charter's not as good as our old charter, so blah blah blah, but we're not going to follow it. So there was kind of like this whole lawlessness that was it suffused the area at the time. So it was, you couldn't really, establishing these courts of laws was something that was difficult, and pretty much the rules were arbitrary. It was just, you could do whatever the fuck you want and just be like,
you say at this time, when you say at this time though, but how many years later, not that, quite a bit actually, were they digging up and exhuming bodies and consuming their organs to find out if they're vampires or not? So, you know what I mean? Like, this is not like that was in what, the 1800s?
No, that was in the 19. That was like
1900s. So you know what I mean? Like
that was like 200
these
years
fucking
later.
people 200 years later going from witches to fucking vampires. So I don't give them too much credit.
Smoke,
Yeah,
smoke
I
and
made that
ashes.
connection too, which I thought was pretty funny. I was like,
Zell,
oh man, New England just fucking
Yeah, that's what I'm
sucks. Like,
saying.
Zell, what do you think? What's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'd like to say that it is a pact with the devil, and this is all his doing.
I will agree with you though, because like, doesn't this seem like an atmosphere of where some sort of evil spirit would thrive? Just random accusations, killings, everyone's on edge.
Well, these
I
guys,
agree.
there's people profiting off people's death and hardship. This is right up the devil's alley. Let me tell you
Well, I
something.
mean-
yeah, Zell would probably be a really good prosecutor during the Salem Witch Trials.
The goddamn
'Cause
devil!
Back then, the devil's existence was an accepted fact. Like this was like, it was like gravity. It was like, you know, this exists. It is a natural force in the universe.
We should probably take Zell's theory for what it is because he was probably there. Like, let's be honest.
I was
Yes.
maybe
I'm
I
just saying,
was.
Also,
even today, I mean, we would probably chalk it up to some sort of mental illness or something. But if you were sitting in court and there was some lady like, the devil made me do it. He first came to me in this, and I didn't want to help, but then he came to me in these shapes. He made me write his name on his book, and he goes, there was many other names in the book, and this is why I did it. I couldn't control myself. Like, honestly, I'd probably have a little shiver down
Would
my
you, though?
spine. Like dude,
that's like
creepy
present
as
day
fuck,
fucking
though.
QAnon. Like, hey, listen, I saw a book
here it
and we
is.
have a bunch of fucking different famous pedophiles, and I know that, like, you know, he told me.
Hey,
it's all
Yeah, a
we
little
talk-
different.
is it?
though.
It's
If we talk
bullshit.
about the devil and God, that's one thing. Like religion, I mean, there's how many religions with their own versions of hell and heaven and ascension
Sure,
and
sure.
underworld and all that shit. However, if you go with now, we're bringing in what if a lot of times people call like, well, demons are not necessarily demons like fallen angels or whatever. They are interdimensional fucking parasites that thrive off you doing fucking horrible shit. This, like, we're talking like extraterrestrial beings, maybe. Like when we talk about devil, like God and devil, maybe that's just a simple term for like what people have through religion and whatever gave it. But maybe there is, because we don't know. Maybe there's an interdimensional parasite that feeds off and like negative energy like that, and maybe that's what it is.
They just poke.
They poke people to do the shit, and maybe like, I mean, obviously that's when we're way out there. You'd never be able to prove that, but a lot of people talk about like, okay, God, if there's obviously like everyone has like feelings of good and bad, like right and wrong, and maybe like there is entities. You can even go simulation theory. Maybe the entities who made the simulation, this is part of the game. You know,
I mean,
if you can get real wild that way.
I'd be really like, there's no way of disproving it. I would be more inclined to think that way if there wasn't certain people profiting off this situation, especially a certain person who's the one making the judgments. And you know what I mean? Like that, if that's for me, that's what fucking puts the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, but that in itself is just like another thing, another layer of like this absolute evil.
It's a false flag. It's like a
Situation.
false flag. That's
Right?
that's the way I see it.
It's like
I could very much get on board with Zell's theory, but the fact is that a lot of these things, like when people think about these events, it's almost like some people think about these as isolated, like it's like this just popped up out of nowhere. But with a lot of these events, like you have things like, you know, even with World War I, there are a series of events that precipitated, that led to the circumstances that surrounded and began and were the ideal, you know, the ideal soil for the seeds of paranoia and hysteria to sprout and grow and thrive.
And
You had the New England colonies that were essentially coming out of post-war. They had just fought two very devastating wars against Native Americans and the French that were living in that were occupying the northern parts of North America. They had essentially, a lot of the people who lived in Salem at the time were refugees from that war. They had speculated, or they had large amounts of property, and you know, their income had been used to speculate land and farmland within the northern, sections of Maine and all those in North Hampshire, and it all had been burned to ash. Like all of this stuff that had happened, raising of taxes, they had a military governor installed, Reverend Paris was an asshole and trying to be like a fucking jerk and trying to make a shitty negotiating deal. The dude was not exactly the person that you would probably want leading a
church,
an impoverished, you wouldn't want them leading an impoverished, very hot at this time, it had been considered hostile town, outside, like out of this kind of depression or this whatever you want to call it, recession. I don't know how to exactly categorize it, but yeah.
There's one other thing that I want to quickly touch on before we move on, is that let's say for a second, we're talking about these Zelv, these parasites that feed on negativity, maybe demonic spirits or whatever. Let's say someone did make a deal with the devil, and this was part of the deal, was to cause this chaos to feed whatever energy this was. You have all these people in town being like, there's a witch, there's, this is going on. Everyone's going along with it. They're running trials. They're taking this seriously. The only time where this is kiboshed is the second Governor Phipp's wife is questioned about witchcraft. The second his wife is questioned, he's like, this is all bullshit. It's hocus pocus. Let everyone go. It's done. It's over.
It's foiled.
This guy sat on trials. He had no issues sitting on trials, having people be put to death. But the second it got close to home and going through any due process, he's like, no, it's done. It's over. It's over. This is all hocus pocus. What are the odds that maybe him and his wife or someone close to him was practicing the witchcraft, and they just got too close to the source of trying to find out where all this chaos was being started from?
I get on board with that for sure.
He was in a position of power, right? We talk about these people in positions of power and how they got there and using rituals and satanic rituals. Maybe that's what something Governor Phipp was doing.
He had actually been on the list of kind of the short list of people who would most likely have been accused of witchcraft, because there were stories or there were things that he had made claims that in order to find the Spanish galleon that I mentioned to make his fortune, he had utilized divination, like fortune telling, to find it. Like it was probably just like bragging. It's probably like, yeah, man, I got these weird mind powers. I just know where it is. I just know.
Or maybe he was making deals, or he had some dark rituals, or his wife was a witch that was helping him. All I'm saying is the second it got close to home, he was like, this is all hocus pocus. Free everyone. This is stupid. It's done.
Yeah.
We were right.
Yeah.
Interesting. I found that interesting.
It's a crazy tale to extend this far into the future and into the actual point that, as Dan said, they actually teach this as a subject in grade school.
Yeah.
Well, I teach The Crucible, which is an allegory for McCarthyism in the 1950s. So it kind of covers two things, but The Crucible is neat. The Crucible is a fun, if you want to read a cool play, read the fucking Crucible. It's neat.
Yeah.
And I would say that from the Salem Witch Trials, it's almost, if you want to read a really good book about it, read Storm of Witchcraft is what I read for most of my notes for this one. By what's the author's name off the top of my head? Storm of Witchcraft by Emerson Baker. Really good book. It has a ton of really cool information about this, and you'll learn way more than you need to about the Salem Witch Trials and how much of an impact that it had on the development of the United States as a whole. Like, it pretty much the events that happened there almost were fomented a lot of the kind of what you could say, the cultural views that would be the basis for the American Revolution. It's pretty neat.
That's neat.
It's the events there. It's out of this tragedy that, almost 100 people died from not just exactly hanged, but people who died of complications of being, just the conditions of being in those shitty ass prisons. under false pretenses and false accusations, like these things, you had something incredible happen. But, if you want to look into that,
fucking hashtag look it up.
Yeah.
Why don't we get into a little bit of space news?
What are we starting with?
We're starting with the biggest news of the day. We heard about it a week ago. It was all over social media. I don't know if we announced the last case file, but NASA was going to give us a big update today on something about the moon. We didn't know what it was, and we found out what it was. There is, in fact, 100% with 100% certainty, there is water, liquid water, on the moon.
Yeah, the article is on sciencealert.com. The author, Michael Starr, unambiguous detection of water on the moon. They've been saying it for what? Like since 2009, they speculated that there was probably water, but it could have been some type of...
they had a pretty good idea that there was water, whether it was in... I think the question is with whether they had liquid or it was just ice.
Yeah, and now it's unambiguous. It's like a different wavelength they've used, and it's unambiguous. All scientists are like, yep, 100%. So they're saying that's going to... If they ever do decide to try and build some type of moon base, that'll just make it that much easier. Because if you got water, you got solar energy, you can power batteries, you can do electrolysis, you can make air, you can make hydrogen, you can make fuel. Like that's like, if you got water, you can do a lot of stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. They made the discovery.
This is another point of why they faked the moon landing, because those motherfuckers didn't see any water, didn't talk about anything. It's because it was all fucking faked.
All 6 or 7 landings, whatever it was, all faked.
To bankrupt the Russians.
They made the discovery using the Sophia telescope. I know we've talked about it before. We've mentioned it and a couple other ones. It's a really cool. Telescope. It's like they strap it onto the back of like a 747 and they fly it up above like the cloud cover and stuff like that, so they get a better view of like the certain light frequencies and things. It's pretty fucking cool. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's
which I think was actually the Sophia telescope is on the like one of the things that was supposed or is a proposed cut to the NASA budget, because it's quite expensive to run. So there was some kind of I read some kind of rumor or somebody kind of theorizing that this whole announcement about water on the moon, it's like we've known about water on the moon. Now, this is not trying to take away from the discovery, but people are also kind of saying like, well, this is kind of a PR stunt by NASA to kind of try to secure its financial security.
Still.
To try to get funding to keep the Sophia telescope and stuff. So I don't know.
Fund NASA. Take a couple billion out of the military budget. Give it to NASA. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
If we could find water on the moon with like whatever they're running on now, like relatively shoestring budget. Like,
yeah,
come on.
In other space news, within the last week, NASA, we made jokes that they were heading to asteroid Bennu to collect some asteroid dust, and we made the jokes that we would be saying that this just in satellite crashes into Bennu, but they did it 320 million kilometers away, and they landed that probe on a spinning asteroid, and they collected some sample of the rubble, and it's on its way home.
Yeah, I got. If you're watching the live stream, I have the video. It's 8-second clip. You can find it on nasa.com. It's pretty awesome. There it goes. Touchdown. It bounces off. It grabs a sample. It's on its way. But I guess it grabbed too much dirt, and as it was flying away,
NASA's eyes is bigger than its stomach.
It took way too big of a
Exactly.
chomp, and that's some of the debris is actually
bit off a
falling
little
out
more
of-
than you can chew, NASA.
Yeah, so it's right now they're hoping that they can save some of the payload. A lot of it has leaked out because I think they fucking jammed up the mechanism grabbing too much.
Yeah.
But hopefully they keep enough that it was worthwhile, the multi-million-dollar mission to collect some dirt.
Yeah. It was cool though.
What else we got? You guys got anything?
Those are the two big ones that I wanted to talk about.
Those are the good ones.
Those are good ones. All right. Why don't we fire up the Randomatron punch it in for fan story and let's see what we get.
Fan story coming up. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. You got it.
This is from an anonymous source. He wishes to remain anonymous.
An anonymous source that
An anonymous
is
anonymous source.
Yes, who wishes to be remained unnamed.
Anonymous.
Anonymously. Thought you guys might want to see this. It was a weird experience, made even more odd after I saw the picture I took. So if you go into our Gmail, it's called interesting picture / backstory if you want to pull up the picture while I'm reading it. It was a weird experience made even more odd after I saw the picture I took. First, here is some relevant background that may lend some credibility. I'm 30 years old, well educated, and wouldn't consider myself a conspiracy theorist or overly obsessed with stuff like that. I spent 5 years in the army as a paratrooper doing all sorts of night operations in C-130s, C-17s, and helicopters, including hundreds of missions in Afghanistan at night. After that, I worked for the DOE as a defense contractor. They basically have SWAT teams that guard the nuclear material and classified data. During this time, I had the highest security clearance you can get and was interviewed by psychiatrists every 6 months to ensure I'm sound of mind. I left that job to work overseas in the Middle East as a paramilitary contractor. I was involved with protecting various agency assets and data there and was also cleared. You know what? Fuck this guy. I'm not going to... I have to say his name. It's Jason Bourne.
Sounds like a badass.
This is Jason Bourne. Jason Bourne wrote this.
Guy's a badass.
I only bring up all this to stress a few things. I have been around helicopters, airplanes, drones, even the stuff you can't just Google if you know what I mean, and other flying things. I know exactly what these known aircraft look like at night. I have been trusted for over a decade now with protecting highly classified information and materials, and am constantly checked on my mental capacities. All of these tests I passed easily, proving I am very mentally stable. The story. About 3 weeks ago, I was having trouble sleeping. I always do. I lived out of the country and I can see the night sky very clearly. I looked outside the window at what I thought was Venus, since it was so bright and had an odd coloring. Then, Venus moved diagonally very fast and came to an immediate stop. No speeding up, no slowing down. I figured it was my eyes adjusting, so I kept watching. It did this 6 more times before I finally admitted to myself that I wasn't just imagining things. Remember, from my background info, if this was a known aircraft, I would recognize how it moves. Nothing moves like this did. It was changing colors very smoothly too. It was seemingly going through all the colors of the rainbow in a random order. It would get dim, then very bright, then zip across the night sky, then dead stop. Sometimes it would do short hook movements too, which is very strange to see. I took my camera and took a picture to see if I could catch anything, and then I went back to bed. I've seen a lot of weird stuff in my life, so this wasn't exactly a life-changing experience. Here is the picture. I promise it has not been photoshopped whatsoever. I zoomed in and cropped it. That's all. Interpret the image however you please. Lastly, if you want to hear more or have questions, that's fine, but I need to be anonymous because I'm Jason Bourne. I don't want attention, and my line of work doesn't allow me to be in the spotlight, especially with this kind of stuff. You guys are awesome. Thanks for your time, Jason Bourne.
All right, there it is. It's up on the
Jason
stream.
Bourne.
Kind of looks like that. Yeah, the more you know, fucking commercial. You know,
It looks like the Reading Rainbow is about to start.
that was a fucking cool story.
That
Need
is a cool
to,
story.
uh,
I mean, the
cool
guy's
story.
got a goddamn a lot of
Wow,
credibility.
yeah. First of all, thank you for your service, Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, it's Jason Bourne.
You know what? You know who else this might be? Fucking Lance
Could be.
Kincaid,
Ooh, that's probably more. That's more likely.
I don't know.
right? He heard us talking about him. This is modern day landscape.
Landscape wouldn't waste his time with
Either
us.
way, interesting story, interesting photo. I have no idea what the fuck that is. And if you're seeing that in the night sky doing shit like that, I'm like, I have no idea what that would be.
That'd be like a 1 in a billion aurora.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's like, it's, as you said, every color of the rainbow. I mean, it's a still image, so you can't see it changing, but I could see that like an LED, like galaxy lamp, kind of what it looks like.
It looks like a light break.
I could see that dancing around on your wall.
Yeah, I'd have to see it.
You have to see
I'd also
a video would be nice.
There's a lot of information that I want to know, like which way were you facing, what time of day, what time of night it was. Yeah, the exact date.
Call in. Well, we got some news and we're gonna announce soon when it's time. Call in. We'll change your voice and tell us a story. That'd be cool.
Call us Matt Damon.
Yeah, get in here.
Get in here, Matt Damon.
Get in here.
That was dope. Yeah, if you got any more stories, send them into alientheorists@gmail.com with the subject of fan submission, and yeah, let Braden know if he can read your name or not.
Yeah, unless you're Jason Bourne, then I'm going to read it.
Yeah, no problem.
So, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, not sorry.
We're going to give it, we got Theorite of the Week. Do we find out
Surprise
the real
gasp.
name? His real name? Or we're going
Benjamin, I think it's Benjamin Ward.
Benjamin Ward.
He's _not a cop
Not
on
a cat.
Instagram.
I'm not a
Holy
cat.
shit. This guy got the coolest tattoo. He got our retro UFO logo. But it's also, is it UV tattoo?
UV goes under UV light.
It glows under UV light, so it lights up. It's absolutely
So
spectacular.
he's gonna be repping us at all those awesome raves.
All his raves,
Yeah.
all his Zeltron concerts from now on.
Yeah, we don't encourage getting tattoos of logos of shows you like, but if you get one, it's pretty dope.
Are you
make it
fucking
ours.
kidding me? Our logo's dope as shit. You get it. It's dope.
Okay. As long as you don't get Braden's face on your arm, we're good.
Don't do that.
That's how we know we made it. Boys, the first person that gets my face tattooed on us, then we know we made it. Until then, we're nobodies.
We're no one. All
But
right.
I want me on the Mars Attacks lady's body, like that Facebook video.
Yeah, that was hilarious. That was a runner-up.
That was a runner-up. Whoever sent that in, you were the runner-up. You were the Theorite of the Week until we remembered about the guy who got the tattoo.
That's true.
So,
Hey, if nothing comes up for next week,
Mars Attacks person.
yep. If nothing comes up for next week, we got to back up. All right. Patreons of the week.
My favorite part of the show.
It's not, you're going to get so sick of this fucking song. I have to make a
Fuck
new one.
that.
I wish you could get sick of it.
I'm already ready.
All right. Patreon supporting October 19th to 26th. We salute you. We have Bradley Prazeres, Mowat, Javier Jimenez, Sarah Greer. Well, actually, was it Sarah? Never mind. I don't think it was her. Beam me up, Chewy. Great name. Andrew Jorgensen, Magdalene Johnson, and Jeremy Dunstan. Thank you very much for supporting the show. If you want to get early access to case files, live stream, bonus content, D&D, a whole bunch of stuff, head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/alientheoristpodcast, or find the link on any of our socials. Easy. And I think that's it for the week.
And as we always say at the end of these things, keep those eyes on the skies.
Peace, everybody.
That's not just the sound of that first sip of Morning Joe. It's the sound of someone shopping for a car on Carvana from the comfort of home.
That's a good blend.
It's time to take it easy, like answering some easy questions to get pre-qualified for a car in minutes.
Talk about starting the morning right.
Just like customizing your terms so your car fits your budget. Visit Carvana.com or download the app to experience car shopping the way it should be. Convenient, comfortable.
Man, that sunset is gorgeous.
Grill, patio, sunset. Hard to get better than that. Unless you're browsing Carvana's inventory while you soak it all in.
Oh, burger time.
So sit back, get comfortable. Carvana's got thousands of cars under $20,000 just waiting for you.
I could stay here forever.
Carvana, where car buying meets comfort meets convenience. Download the app or visit Carvana.com today.